I cannot emphasize the delicacy of this procedure. This is an incredibly sensitive area with so many possibilities for things that could go so very, very wrong. The fact that we have to keep this so incredibly stationary during the entire procedure, the patient is going to wake up with a very sore jaw. They're going to feel what I would recommend, what I would call muscle soreness, not only in the tip of the tongue, but also at both sides of the tongue, and probably at the root of the tongue as well, because we have extended the tongue so far outside the patient's mouth. It's one of those things where you have to take such very delicate care of the situation. Now, as you can see, because we are so close, the foreign body has segments, and we have to be so very, very careful to remove the foreign body, but not break it. Because if we suffer the breakage, it can be such a very complicated process for removing it. Because not only do you have to worry about removing it from the tongue itself, once it breaks, it will actually start to retract into the muscle of the tongue itself. Now, many patients don't realize that the tongue is actually the largest muscle in the human body. So it's no surprise that this parasite moved into it, because it is literally a feast for any sort of meat-eating vermin or parasitical creature. So the fact that this patient let us get to this level with this difficulty, he'll be lucky to be able to keep all the sensation in his tongue. So what we continue to do is gracefully, gently remove it as best we can. It's a very quick procedure. Doesn't take very long at all. You just have to be incredibly cautious when removing it to make sure that it doesn't break. That's all we need to do with this, is just to make sure that we continue to move forward with the process, to be firm but gentle, because as the segments go through the muscle itself, it does have a higher potential for breakage. Now, as you can see, we've already gotten close to 5 or 6 centimeters out of the tongue itself. Luckily, the patient is deeply anesthetized, so he will not be in any sort of discomfort at all. This could be a very awkward procedure if he was still conscious. Luckily, he is not. So what we do is we continue to extract. Oh my goodness, look at that. Now we're up to probably 8 to 9 centimeters of foreign body that have been extracted from the tongue and the muscle around it. And we continue to quickly but very carefully remove this creature from the patient. Now, as you can tell, here at the end, it's very, very thin. And as we remove it, it continues to get fatter and fatter. And I have a feeling that as we continue to remove this creature, it will sort of vary in size between fatter and thinner segments, up. And just as I predicted, here we can see that we have smaller and thinner segments that are finally coming to light. So this is where it's so very tricky. It's a precarious situation whenever we get these smalls here, because we have to be very careful to remove them little by little, because they can get very, very fragile this close to the tongue. But once we get to a fatter section of the foreign body, we can be a little bit more aggressive in our treatment, and it will move along even faster than it is now. I'll be honest, this is a very quick progress for a procedure such as this. We continue to remove it bit by bit. Okay, I'm getting a little bit nervous about pulling this aggressively. Let me lubricate a little bit. We're using petroleum jelly. We will lubricate right around the entrance or exit wound. And we continue to ever so gently pull. Oh yeah, that's working really great now. It's really coming through quickly. Wonderful. The thing that always makes me nervous about this is the breakage. If we're not really, really careful, if we're not supremely cautious, oh, exactly, just like that, it will start to crawl back into the tongue, because it realizes exactly what's happening. It starts to reverse its course, but that is not an option. We have to continue to keep constant pressure and zero slack as we remove the creature from the cavity. Wonderful. And now you can tell that they're starting to get fat again. The segment went from thin to fat to thin, and now we're starting to get back into the fatter segmentation. We will continue to remove very quickly, very adeptly. Exactly. We have to move it very, very gently, but very quickly, millimeter by millimeter. And it will continue to slide out of the tongue. Okay, and we have to be very careful again, because here we are. That's the end of our thicker segment, and we're getting down into the more slender, segmented section of the foreign body. And we will continue to just ease it out very, very gently, firmly, but gently, and very quickly. As I mentioned before, it's crucial to this procedure that we continue to make forward progress, that we don't just wait for something to happen. We have to make it happen. Otherwise, the foreign body will attempt to return to the cavity where it was hiding before. We're really very fortunate that we found it when we did. I do so enjoy these lectures. Procedures like this, it's always so interesting because, of course, the patient is very heavily sedated. The anesthesia is complete. So conversation is not really something that we do. Of course, they wouldn't be very capable of holding a conversation with their tongue in my hands. But as you can see, we've removed probably close to 6 or 7 inches of the foreign body. And it does that oscillation from the thin to the fat to the thin. And I think we're about due for another fat segmentation. Very, very gently, very carefully removing, piece by piece, millimeter by millimeter, segment by segment. Okay, as the patient's tongue dries, we need to make sure that we continue to help with the moisturization by using the petroleum jelly. Otherwise, this could make for a very difficult extraction process. We'll continue to pull very slowly, very gently, but also very firmly. Perfect. Wonderful. Now, also, as the foreign body continues to move out of the tongue, it may start to excrete a certain type of lubrication, which isn't necessarily very tasty or very pleasant for the patient. It also, in enough quantities, could actually be harmful to the patient. So what I'll do now is just take one of our gauze pads, make sure that we remove that as delicately as possible, as well as completely as possible, and continue with our procedure. Gently, but quickly and firmly, removing the foreign body from the orifice. I'm very pleased with the progress we're making. It's happening very quickly. Though I am somewhat nervous about the well-being of the patient for recovery. I think that the actual condition of the patient while we are performing this procedure is excellent. Vitals are holding, blood pressure is normal, heart rate is slightly elevated, which honestly comes as no surprise. We have to be so very careful. We're starting to get into a larger segmented section of the foreign body. And we will continue. Oh, that's amazing. It's always so important to make sure that we keep the tongue nice and moist. Now, water is not what we would use for such. We would use a medium like a petroleum jelly, a vegetable oil, something with a very organic base to make sure that we keep things moving very, very easily and quickly. We want to provide as little trauma as possible to any and all of the systems of the body, whether it's through the anesthesia or the actual procedure itself. And I am amazed at the length of this parasite. We have to have removed at least 7 inches so far, and still it just keeps going. So again, we get it as close as we can to the tongue and pull gently but firmly, keeping a progressive extraction technique of pull and grasp. Pull and grasp. Good. Now we're getting to the point now where we're almost finished. I can tell because the worm will continue to pull its way into the muscle. It doesn't like the fact that we're trying to get it out of what it's called home for the last however long. So as we get to the end of the parasite, it will continue to try to crawl back inside the warm, nourishing atmosphere it's inhabited for so long. So you can see how it's starting to stretch. We want to be ever so careful to make sure that we don't pull this too hard so that it doesn't break, so that it all stays exactly where we want it to be. But we also need to make sure that the parasite knows that it can no longer inhabit the muscle it's grown so accustomed to living in. Yeah, I can feel the tongue now. It needs just a little bit more lubrication, a little moistening. There we are. Oh, and you can tell that he's already starting to try to climb back inside. No. That is not the option, friend. Today is move out day, and you, sir, have received your eviction notice. Now, once we remove the foreign body, what I'm going to do is also prescribe an oral antibiotic to make sure that just in case any of the naturally excreted lubrication remains inside the muscle itself, that it doesn't set up any kind of infection. It's really important to guard against infection because the problem is not necessarily the foreign body that's inside, but the infection it leaves behind once we get it out. That's really our main concern under these kinds of things. So at this point, we're doing really well. We've already gone from another fatter segmentation to a more slender segmentation, which means that we're almost out. We're nearly finished with this incredible procedure. We have extracted probably what I would say is 10 to 12 inches of parasite from Mr. Bailey's tongue. I honestly don't know how in the world he got this taken this far. It must have been incredibly uncomfortable for him, but he said it gave him no issue at all. He just noticed his taste was being affected adversely. So we did x-rays, we did checks, and sure enough, we found this little visitor nestled inside the largest muscle in his body. Again, we're going to make sure that we keep things nice and moist without giving the parasite a chance to retreat back into the body. It's very important we keep a very firm grasp on the tongue. As you can see that I've placed my fingers on either side. And we just continue to gently but quickly extract the parasite. He has no business here. The viruses and bacteria that he could be carrying or shedding while inside the tongue or other muscular systems in Mr. Bailey could be very detrimental to his health. So once we remove him, which should be any moment now, it's going very quickly. I'm very pleased with his progress. The anesthesia has been very effective. He hasn't even stirred during this entire situation. And I continue to moisten the tongue so that it is less traumatic for him whenever he regains consciousness from the anesthesia. We pull gently but firmly and also very quickly, because we're getting to the point now where if we wait any longer, the head or tail of the parasite can actually hook into the last vestiges of the system. So again, this is where we're very careful, very gentle, but in no uncertain terms is he to stay. Okay, for the very last few moments, I'm going to take the forceps because they will exert an even greater, more aggressive grip on our friend. And ever so gently, ever so carefully remove him, segment by segment, millimeter by millimeter, incredibly quickly. This entire process has gone so fast. I'm so pleased with his progress. He followed every bit of preparation that I outlined for him before the surgery, clearly, because this is going so very smoothly. And we are removing the last bits of this parasite right now. I'm so pleased with this. I can't wait to show him what we retrieved from his tongue after the procedure once he's in recovery. This is remarkable. I wish you could see this. Oh my goodness, here we go. All right. Almost there. And, oh, yep, here we are. And